I told you that the man who seems so distant, yet always comes back, who seeks you out but never fully commits, is living through one of the most profound conflicts in male psychology, could you accept that truth? There's a discovery about men's fear of love that might explain why he acts so contradictory with you. And it's not about you not being enough. It's about something far more complex happening inside his soul. I know exactly what it's like to live on that emotional roller coaster that always leaves you questioning whether you're interpreting the signals correctly. To feel that he wants you intensely in the gazes that pierce your soul, but at the same time, to realize that something invisible prevents him from truly diving into the relationship. I know what it's like to wake up in the middle of the night thinking, am I asking for too much? Should I be more patient? Is the problem in the way I love? You're not the first woman to wonder if you're imagining things, if you're being too dramatic, or if you should simply give up and protect your heart before it hurts even more. One of the greatest scholars of human love discovered something revolutionary about this male terror of surrender. Many men deeply desire true love, but they've been socially conditioned to see it as a mortal threat to their masculine identity. They want to connect with an intensity that frightens them, but they fear completely losing themselves in the process. They want to surrender to what they feel, but they've been taught since they were little that it represents weakness, dependence, loss of control. And until you understand this fundamental psychological dynamic, you'll continue to wonder if the problem lies with you, with the intensity of your love, or with the way you relate to him. Your feminine energy is too precious to be wasted trying to decipher contradictory signals or walking on emotional eggshells. And today, you're going to understand why he acts this way, and above all, how to respond from your own wholeness and wisdom, not from your insecurity and anxiety. There's a paradox at the heart of men that few openly admit. The deeper a man feels he needs a woman, the more intensely he might resist fully surrendering to her. It's as if the very longing, the emotional need itself, becomes a direct threat to the independence he's spent a lifetime building and defending as his very identity. Notice the conflicting signs you may already intimately recognize in your relationship. He seeks you out constantly, but always with casual excuses that downplay the real significance of those encounters. He looks at you with an intensity that pierces your defenses and seems to read your soul, but then acts as if none of that deep connection ever happened. He talks about your future together indirectly, full of possibilities, but recoils immediately when you try to deepen the conversation or ask for more clarity. He demonstrates obvious jealousy when other men approach you, but can't clearly verbalize what he feels or what place you hold in his life. These seemingly contradictory behaviors aren't elaborate games to confuse or emotionally manipulate you. They're genuine manifestations of a deep internal conflict that many men carry. Psychology shows us that most men live in a constant state of ambivalence about true love. They desperately crave deep, authentic connection, but simultaneously fear the radical vulnerability that connection demands. From the time they were little boys, most men have learned through 1,000 subtle and direct messages that emotional dependence on someone is dangerous territory for their masculinity. That showing emotional need is a sign of unacceptable weakness. That completely surrendering to another human being means losing the control that defines who they believe they should be as men. And when they find a woman who awakens deep and uncontrollable feelings in them, all that social conditioning goes to war with the natural desire for connection that beats in the human heart. That's exactly why he might want you with an intensity that even he doesn't fully understand, and at the same time maintain an emotional distance that leaves you constantly insecure about where you really stand in his life. It's not because he doesn't value you, it's because he values you so much that the fear of losing himself completely in that love becomes utterly overwhelming. The deepest root of this masculine fear lies in a fundamentally distorted belief about what it truly means to love another person. So many men mistake emotional surrender for a complete loss of self, authentic intimacy for a kind of unhealthy dependence, genuine vulnerability for a humiliating weakness. And this confusion creates a painful emotional cycle where they get so close to connection and then automatically pull back, leaving the woman in a constant state of uncertainty and anxiety. What really goes on in his mind when he feels like he's truly falling in love? When he realizes that you're becoming too important in his life? Terrifying thoughts arise like, If I give myself to her completely, she'll have too much power over me and she could destroy me. If I show her how much I really need her, I'll become too vulnerable and she could use that against me. If I let her completely into my life and occupy all that space, I'll lose my freedom and my identity as an independent man. These fears might not be rational when analyzed objectively, but they are absolutely real and visceral to him. Modern psychology reveals that this terror of emotional surrender often stems from old, unhealed wounds or from deeply dysfunctional male role models that he internalized during the formation of his personality. Maybe he witnessed his father completely losing himself in a relationship and losing the respect of his family. Maybe he was betrayed or brutally rejected in previous moments of maximum vulnerability. Maybe he grew up in a family culture where men who showed emotional need were ridiculed or belittled. Or maybe he simply never had models for how it's possible to love deeply without erasing yourself as a person. And here's the core understanding that can revolutionize the way you interpret his behaviors. This fear isn't about you specifically. It's not because you're not attractive enough, interesting enough, loving enough, or understanding enough. It's not because he doesn't love you, or because you're doing something fundamentally wrong in the way you relate to him. It's an internal battle between the natural human desire for deep connection and the conditioned terror of emotional dependence that many men carry like an invisible scar. When you understand this on a deep level, something transformative happens. You stop automatically interpreting his resistance as personal rejection. You stop blaming yourself for his emotional hesitation. You stop desperately trying to prove that it's safe to surrender to you completely. Because the freeing truth is that this inner security needs to blossom from within him through his own psychological work, not from your heroic efforts to convince him that you are worthy of trust. Now let's get to what truly matters for your inner peace and emotional well-being, how you can navigate this complex dance without losing yourself completely or sacrificing your own emotional integrity. The first liberating truth you need to embrace is that it's not your job to heal his fear of intimacy. Your sacred responsibility is to maintain your own emotional stability and inner clarity as you consciously decide whether it's worth investing your time and energy waiting for him to sort through his internal struggles. Actively practice observing his contradictory behaviors without automatically absorbing the anxiety and confusion they naturally stir within you. When he pulls close with emotional intensity and then inexplicably withdraws, instead of panicking or chasing after him to regain that lost connection, take a few deep breaths and gently remind yourself, this isn't about you or anything you've done wrong. It's about his own inner journey, something you can't control or rush. This definitely doesn't mean being passive or indefinitely accepting emotional breadcrumbs in the name of psychological understanding. It means learning to consistently respond from your own inner clarity and personal values, not from the insecurity and anxiety his inconsistent behavior might spark in your heart. You can compassionately recognize that he's genuinely struggling with his own deep-seated fears without automatically taking on the responsibility of resolving that struggle for him, or endlessly adapting to dysfunctional patterns. One transformative practice that can completely shift the dynamic is to calmly verbalize what you observe, without drama or turning it into an emotional showdown. Instead of emotionally charged accusations or desperate attempts to force premature definitions, you can simply name the pattern with a peaceful tone. I notice you pull close and then pull away. Is that something you're also aware of? Is it something you'd be willing to talk about? This mindful approach creates space for genuine, mature conversation without automatically putting him on the defensive. Keep your own legitimate emotional needs as a top priority in your decision-making process. If you need clarity about where you're headed together, it's perfectly okay to ask for that. If you need basic emotional consistency to feel safe and secure in the relationship, it's completely valid to communicate that need. It's not your responsibility to endlessly adapt to his insecurity and inconsistency just because you understand where those patterns come from. The thing so many smart, empathetic women miss is that actively trying to convince a man it's safe to be emotionally vulnerable usually backfires. The harder you try to prove, through words and actions, that you won't hurt or betray him, the more you inadvertently confirm his fears that loving someone means constantly explaining yourself, justifying your actions, and losing your autonomy and personal freedom. Authentic feminine energy has a completely natural magnetic power that doesn't need conscious effort or elaborate strategy to work. When you're truly connected to your own essence, centered in your own life and projects, radiating your own inner light regardless of what's happening in the relationship, it creates a subtle energetic field that naturally invites him closer without pressure or demands. It's as if you're saying without uttering a word, "I'm here, whole and emotionally available, but I'm not waiting for you to feel complete as a woman." Watch carefully how he reacts when you stop obsessively trying to decode his every move and simply live your life with genuine joy and purpose. When you stop analyzing whether he's pulling closer or drifting away and focus entirely on your own journey of growth and fulfillment. When you stop subtly adapting your behavior to his fears and resistance and simply are yourself in all your complexity and authenticity. So often, what the man who's afraid to commit most desperately needs to see is concrete evidence that you won't completely dissolve into the relationship if he opens up. That you have your own solid identity, your own dreams and ambitions, your own source of happiness and fulfillment that exists independently of him. This directly counters his terrifying fantasy that loving deeply means being completely absorbed and losing all individuality. Consciously practice having regular conversations about your own creative projects, your own passions and interests, your own personal and spiritual growth. Not to provoke artificial jealousy or create manipulative distance, but to constantly remind him through concrete examples that you're a complete and fulfilled person who generously chooses to share life with him, not someone who desperately needs him to exist or feel valuable. And in those precious moments when he shows genuine openings, glimpses of real and authentic vulnerability, receive those gifts with natural warmth and gratitude, without making a huge fuss, without turning it into a grand achievement to be celebrated, without pressuring him to repeat that level of openness immediately. Treat his vulnerability as something completely natural and welcome, not as something rare and precious that needs to be protected with special care or celebrated in an exaggerated way. But there's a dangerous shadow in this psychological dance that you need to recognize and name clearly to protect your own emotional well-being. Some men have discovered they can conveniently use fear of commitment as a sophisticated excuse to keep you in a perpetual state of insecurity and anxiety. They may have learned through experience that understanding, empathetic, and psychologically aware women tend to accept emotionally inconsistent behavior when there's a seemingly valid psychological reason behind it. The key difference between a man who genuinely struggles with his deep-seated fears and actively works to overcome them, and one who simply doesn't want to commit but uses psychological language as a shield, lies in the overall direction of his movement over time. The former might have temporary setbacks and moments of resistance, but there's an observable trajectory of growth, a gradual increasing openness over the months, a real and consistent effort to overcome his emotional limitations. The latter skillfully uses the psychological explanation as a protective shield to avoid any real movement towards genuine intimacy. He might even eloquently verbalize that he's afraid of commitment because he's learned through experience that it generates automatic understanding and endless patience from women. But in practice, there's absolutely no inner work being done or progress being shown. You need to observe not just the pretty words he speaks, but the actual behavioral patterns over extended periods. Is genuine progress being made, even if it's slow and gradual? Are there increasing moments of greater emotional intimacy and vulnerability? Is there visible effort on his part to consciously work through his issues through therapy, self-awareness, or deep conversations? Or is it just the same exact cycle of seductive approach, followed by inexplicable withdrawal being mechanically repeated indefinitely? Be especially careful of the subtle trap of unintentionally becoming his unpaid emotional therapist. It's one thing to compassionately understand that he has human fears and limitations. It's quite another to unconsciously assume responsibility for healing them through your love, patience, and understanding. You're not in a romantic relationship to be the magic cure for his emotional wounds. You're in a relationship to build something mutually beautiful, healthy, and enriching together. And above all, never allow psychological understanding to become a convenient justification for accepting less than you fundamentally deserve as a woman. Rationally understanding why someone acts a certain way doesn't automatically mean you're obligated to indefinitely tolerate behaviors that hurt you or leave you constantly anxious. Intellectual understanding is not synonymous with unlimited emotional acceptance. The real transformation of this painful dynamic happens when you stop seeing his fear as an urgent problem to be solved and start seeing it simply as valuable information about current compatibility and life timing. Not every man who's afraid to commit is genuinely ready for the kind of mature, stable, and mutually nurturing relationship that you desire and deserve. And that doesn't represent a failure on your part or his. It's simply incompatibility of the moment and circumstances. The truly right man for you at this point in your life is the one who, even though he has understandable human fears, is actively willing to work on them with courage, because he values the special connection with you more than he values the familiar comfort of remaining closed off and controlled. He's the one who can verbalize his emotional difficulties and consciously ask for patience while he works on them with real tools, instead of simply acting in contradictory ways and expecting you to magically guess what's going on in his inner world. When you anchor yourself deeply in this transforming clarity, you completely stop wasting precious energy trying to be the perfect woman who will finally make him feel safe enough to commit. Instead, you naturally become more selective and discerning about who truly deserves your patience, understanding, and emotional investment. You offer generous space for his growth, but always within clear boundaries that preserve your own emotional well-being and dignity. Practice communicating your legitimate needs with loving clarity and gentle firmness. I understand that you may have understandable fears about deep relationships, and I can be patient with that growth process. But I also need some basic emotional consistency and clarity about where we're going together to feel safe investing my heart here. This mature approach creates a respectful space for him to work on his issues without turning you into an eternally anxious waiter. And above all, always stay connected with your own feminine intuition about what is genuinely healthy and nurturing for you. Sometimes the wisest and most loving decision a woman can make is to recognize that she loves someone deeply, but that someone isn't in the emotional condition to offer the kind of relationship that she needs at this specific moment in life. That doesn't mean a lack of understanding, patience, or capacity to love. It means self-love. It means recognizing with clarity that you deserve to be with someone who is walking in the same direction as you, not someone who is eternally deciding whether or not he wants to take that walk by your side. True emotional freedom comes when you understand, deep down, that you don't need to decode every little thing a man does to make smart choices about your love life. You can simply watch with a calm heart how you feel when you're with him, how the dynamic between you affects your inner peace and emotional stability. See if the relationship is growing in a healthy way, or just going around in circles, draining your precious energy. When a man is really working on his fear of truly giving himself over to a serious, committed relationship, it shows in his actions. He actively tries to understand what holds him back, maybe through therapy, or just looking inward. He talks about what he's struggling with instead of just acting in ways that are confusing. He makes small, steady moves toward greater emotional closeness, even if it's slow. A man who's truly committed to growing emotionally won't leave you constantly guessing where you stand in his life or how important you really are to him. He might have understandable fears, he might pull back sometimes, but he'll also have a basic clarity about his feelings and intentions. He won't use his fears as a permanent excuse to keep you feeling insecure. Your sacred feminine energy deserves to be cherished by someone who, even with their own natural human limitations, truly recognizes the rare gift that you are. You deserve someone who consciously fights against their own fears because they understand that what you can build together is worth so much more than the familiar comfort of staying closed off and in control. And if he can't be in that place of emotional maturity just yet, you can genuinely love him from afar, sincerely wish him the best on his journey, but don't sacrifice your own emotional peace and stability by waiting indefinitely for him to become available for the kind of love you have to offer. A truly powerful and centered woman is one who can have real compassion for a man's fears without completely losing herself in them, who can offer generous patience without giving up her own legitimate emotional needs, who can love deeply without becoming a hostage to someone else's psychological limitations. Today, I invite you to join me in a profound exercise in emotional clarity that can completely transform your perspective. Find a quiet, sacred moment, sit comfortably, gently place your hands on your heart, and take a few deep breaths. Now, ask yourself with absolute honesty, how do I really feel when I'm with him? Do I feel seen, valued, safe to express my truth? Or do I constantly feel anxious, trying to decipher mixed signals, tiptoeing on emotional eggshells? Breathe even deeper and allow the answer to rise naturally from your body and your heart, not from your mind, which might want to justify, explain, or rationalize. Your feminine spirit holds an ancient wisdom. It intuitively knows the difference between a love that nourishes and expands your energy and a love that constantly drains and confuses it. Between someone who is genuinely walking towards you and someone who is eternally deciding whether or not they even want to. Remember, deep down, you don't have to be anyone's emotional therapist to be worthy of true and consistent love. You don't need to have endless patience for someone else's fears to be considered a good woman. You don't have to accept emotional breadcrumbs just because you psychologically understand where his difficulty comes from. The liberating truth about a man who wants you but is afraid to commit is that he needs time and space for his own courageous journey of emotional healing. And you need crystal clear clarity and loving firmness so you don't lose yourself in that journey along with him, sacrificing your own stability in the process. When you keep your own emotional integrity as your absolute priority, when you offer genuine understanding without sacrificing your legitimate needs, when you love generously without becoming a hostage to someone else's limitations, you create the safest possible environment for him to work through his fears. But most importantly, you preserve your own sanity, dignity, and feminine power in the process. You deserve a love that consciously chooses to grow, that faces its own fears with courage, that walks resolutely toward you, even when it's scary. And if he can't offer that right now, may this precious information set you free to make choices that completely honor who you truly are. A whole woman who deserves to be loved in her sacred totality.